What's up, friends? Thank you so much for tuning in to the Be Less Unfit Performance podcast YouTube show. You're going to notice over the course of these videos that I've changed a lot. I filmed these over the course of 2 years. So as my life changed, you see my body change. 1. 2, I changed the way I was going to use these videos. They were going to only be an add-on to the program. Instead, I wanted everybody to be able to have this great information, and so now they're live. If you have any questions or want to know more about the Be Less Unfit program, please head over to sampogue.com or belessunfit.com to learn more and check it out. In the meantime, please enjoy this amazing show and learn more about our guests by going down to the comment section bio area and click what they have going on. I'm so blessed that they said yes to helping me out, and I want you to go learn from them as well. So enjoy the show, have a great day, and please remember to subscribe. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the BLF program, your body, lifestyle, fitness, performance program. I'm sitting down here with my good friend, John Baker, mental skills coordinator, mindfulness practitioner, mind coach, athlete, husband, father, just a good human being. And we're here to chat about mindfulness. And as you guys are going to notice in the program, some of the daily habits that you're being asked to go on are 10 minutes of quiet, 5 minutes of quiet, 15 minutes of quiet. And I call it, sitting quietly by yourself, but it's really mindfulness. It's really a meditation practice. But the thing I really see with meditation and mindfulness is that people have this stigma about what it's supposed to be. And that defeats the whole purpose in the journey of doing mindfulness training. And I want to help bring in an expert here, someone I really value, to talk about how we can go from, I don't know where to start, to how do I get that voice in my head to shut the fuck up, to how do I actually install this into a habit, and then what am I supposed to even know, right? Like someone sits and says, quiet the voice in your head, but you don't even know what the value that gives you later in life. So how are you supposed to sit and say, like, that's valuable? And John here is going to be able to break that all down so the everyday people get to see it. One thing I really loved seeing from him is I loved watching him do it with his family and his 2 daughters. And while kids aren't the best meditators, like they practice going in and doing it. And that only is going to get better as they get older. So John Baker, super pumped to have you here. Thank you very much for carving out some time. I'm really happy to chat about this journey that you're on as well and learn everything about it.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you, Sam, for having me. I think that you kind of hit on the main issue that most people have with this concept, which is just that, which is trying to quiet the voice in their head. And before I really dive deeply into why that's actually the incorrect perspective to take, I'll give you a little bit of my personal background in the subject and in mindfulness training and practice in general. Played professional sports for 15 years, played professional baseball for a long time, all the way up into the major leagues. And then when my career ended, I had this massive kind of void in my life, void of competition, void of traveling, void of novelty. And I needed to find some things to fill it. And so on like a personal level, like a sports level, I found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I train that every day. Like today, I'll train twice a day. And that kind of replaces all the baseball practice part of it. And then you had the kind of intellectual component of the position that I played, catcher, where you're having to figure out game plans and strategies and tactics and understand your teammates and what pitcher can do what in what situation. You have to know all these things and be able to go through it in your mind. And I've replaced that with school. When I stopped playing baseball, I went back and finished my undergrad. Then I spent a year at the University of Miami learning mindfulness-based attention training from neuroscientist Dr. Amishi Jha. And now I'm currently in a performance psychology graduate school program working on that. And so that field, but then the final part was I had all this anxiety all of a sudden that popped up that didn't exist before. And one would think that when you're under pressure and you're under stress, you have more anxiety, but in reality, they were more real than the stresses that I have now. When you're playing baseball and there's 40 or 50,000 people in the stands and there's a picture of your face on this board and right next to it's your shitty record up to that point, and people are jeering or laughing or cheering and you feel all this pressure, that pressure is kind of real. It's real and it's immediate. You can see it. When we don't, in the absence of those things, when you've developed this high capacity for stress, in the absence of it, we're a narrative animal. So we'll make that story up in our head that's just as powerful as a giant crowd of people. And that's kind of where I started, was trying to figure out, like, what the heck do I do about this, like, endless narrative that goes on in my brain all the time. And when I didn't have stress, I started applying this narrative to just totally different things that didn't even make any sense. You know, what was this person thinking about me? All of a sudden I had this like 2 or 3 week period where I felt like I was back in 7th grade again. I think anybody can remember those feelings, you know, of being like 12 or 13 and sitting in class and looking at everybody, and the idea that you think that everybody's looking at you, and in reality, everybody's just kind of thinking the same thing. Everyone thinks that everyone's looking at them. And I had to stop, and I'm like, I need to figure out what to do. I'm fortunate to have a great friend, Darnell McDonald, who came off at the same time, and he at the time was doing his hours to become a yoga instructor. And he called me one day and he's like, man, how are you doing not playing? And I'm like, phew, I'm struggling. Like, I don't know what to do. I feel like my mind's racing all the time. I feel confused, you know, like I'm really competitive around the house and stuff with my family. And he was like, well, you know, the best part of this yoga stuff that I've been doing has been the meditation. And he's like, let's try it. And so I drove over to the baseball complex down the street from us where we both used to work. And we went really early one morning, and we sat there, we sat there when the sun was rising, and facing kind of the sunrise. And as the sun rose, I got really emotional, and I didn't have words to name the emotions. I didn't have an understanding or the emotional intelligence to figure out what was going on. But in just stopping for a second, and I think we sat for about 10 or 12 minutes, that allowed this space for all this stuff to come up. And I started to realize that even though I didn't know what was going on, what I was doing was valuable and it was important. And so once I assigned value to giving myself the space to think and feel like that, I started investigating it a little bit more scientifically and systematically. And I really got into reading books by people like Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's the father and founder of Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction out of the University of Massachusetts. Caught on with Dr. Amishi Jha and went and got trained. And I think that, to go back now to what we were talking about, what mindfulness means and why so many people think they need to shut their mind up when they don't. Mindfulness is about paying attention in a particular way. And there's some, I guess, caveats that you have to hit to make sure that it's mindfulness practice. So on purpose, so we've sat down on purpose to do something. In the present moment, so right now, and then without any judgment. And I think that that's the final element that's the final icing on the cake that makes the practice so valuable. So one of the things I've learned now over the last 5 years of daily practice is that, and unfortunately I hate to say this to all the people that are sitting down and their minds wandering, it doesn't get any better. It doesn't get any better.
That's really good to know for me too.
Yeah, you're not going to get better at this. There is no better, and that's another part. So better or worse is being judgmental of the experience. There only is, and that's the point of sitting down. Sitting practice, setting an intention to do something simple. Notice how my body expands and softens as I breathe, right? When I sit down, immediately and inevitably, because it is the nature of the mind to wander, we are going to go somewhere else. We might go to the future, we might go to the past, we might lock into a physical sensation in our body, ow, my hip hurts, or we might even get caught up in like a thought pattern. You know, when I do this with athletes, a lot of times I'll have them sit down and I'll put them into a practice and I'll be guiding it. And then like 2 minutes in, I go, you might be thinking, this is fucking stupid. And I see a lot of them kind of like perk up, like, that's what I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking that this has no value and that this is stupid. But man, in reality, we live in the most distracting time in human history. We've never had iPhones before with wonderful apps that can tell us about everything. We've never had these backlit screens before. We've never had access to this information like we have now. And so as a result, it's had a big effect on our attention span. I think the last I read, our attention span was down to like 9 seconds, like a goldfish on average. And if you listen to, I don't know, somebody like Peter Haberl, who's the head sports psychologist for the U.S. Olympic Committee, his main quote is that attention is the currency of performance. What you're paying attention to, what you're focused on, that's going to help you. You're going to be more successful with more focus applied to that particular area. It's a very simple formula. And our ability and our capacity to sustain our attention, we're losing it. You know, I mean, so much so that when you talk to sports teams or athletes, what you find is that, and a lot of, from college football to the NBA to Major League Baseball, teams are realizing, and they're reading the science, and they're looking at the data, and they're realizing that they've got to get everything out in 4.5 to 5 minutes, or else their athletes can't follow after that anymore. So gone are the days of sitting and lecturing to people for a long period of time. And when we do stuff like this, or when we're doing educational sessions now in my line of work, we're talking for 2 or 3 minutes and we're stopping, but it's because of our lack of attention that we have. So that's what you're doing when you're sitting down. And I'll flip it one more time. Having a long-running narrative and the inability to sit still, every time you reorient your attention back to your original intention in a sitting practice, you can think of that, and we can use the weight room as a template for this. You can think of that as a repetition, or it's a deadlift for your ability to focus and concentrate. So the more active the mind, the more distractions that are around you in your environment, the more opportunities you have to practice. And that's what it is. It's not mindfulness training in a sense that you're going to get better at it. It's mindfulness practice, and it's always practice. It's always practice. There is no place you're going. There is no specific or certain way that you're supposed to feel. There is no real future goal other than being in this present moment. And now, that being said, when they fMRI brains, and when they look at the structural changes of the brain for people that have been, have had a consistent practice over, I think maybe only 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, you see like thickening in different areas of the brain. You see brain scans of long-term meditators, similar to people that have experimented pretty heavily with things like DMT and psychedelics. When they have the disillusion of kind of the I and the ego thoughts in their head, that little center of the brain gets less active over time when you sit and give yourself the opportunity to constantly work on refocusing and reorienting your attention. I think another area that we could consider mindfulness practice would be in strength and conditioning and in weightlifting. If you're going to pick something up heavy, or you're going to make a move that's difficult, and you have to get fully connected and in the moment with your body, and everything has to be in the right place, and your breathing has to be in a certain rhythm, that in itself is a mindfulness exercise as well.
I've had some pretty cool experiences. One of the cool ones was you, Darnell, and I hiked Camelback, and then we meditated at the top. And that was really cool. I had a really cool meditative experience. Physical exertion, sunshine, hanging out with some buddies. The stage was set to have a good experience, right? But I've also been through traumatic experiences, and by traumatic I mean just difficult exposures to situations, that I can sit back now and say, wow, thankfully I'm on this mindfulness journey, and I've been able to remove my ego from the situation, and instead of being reactive to the situation at hand, like a bad coworker or whatever, I can sit and like, okay, what's really going on here before I react? And now, and like I'm in this circle all the time, so I'm hanging out with guys like you who I share this with. But a lot of people who are going to get exposed to this program for the first time, they haven't had the aha moments, or they haven't heard someone else have an aha moment, and which is like a lot of the athletes that you work with. How do you help someone who has no idea what the aha moment is even going to feel like, or the feeling that they're going to get from it, because they don't understand meditation, you're just telling them to do it? How do you help them understand what they're going to get out of it? Because the idea of telling me that it's a practice that I'm never going to get better at does not motivate me to want to pursue this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a paradox. And I think, John Kabat-Zinn, again, writes extensively about this idea. In fact, he even, despite writing books on the subject, despite inventing mindfulness-based stress reduction, which that program out of he's a medical doctor, and that program is more successful in helping people mitigate the symptoms that come from anxiety and depression than any pharmacological intervention. But he says that you shouldn't even advertise meditation and mindfulness, because people are only going to be able to come to it when they're ready. And I think that you're right. The toughest thing to do is to figure out how to trust in consistent practice. Now, one of the things that I do say to people about mindfulness practice in particular is that it doesn't cost any money. I think that that's a valuable thing to think about. You know, the blueprint written by Dr. Amishi Jha, and she's easily, I mean, consults with the Dalai Lama, somebody that's easy to find on social media or on the internet. She runs the Jha Laboratory at the University of Miami. So she kind of came up with a kind of hard science blueprint, which is 5 times a week for 12 minutes a day. So we're talking about an hour of your week, and we're talking about 12 minutes at a time. And that 12 minutes is spent doing one of, in the mindfulness-based attention training format, one of 4 practices. But in reality, just using a focused attention practice, just choosing to focus on one thing and constantly come back to that until the timer goes off. Being able to trust and make that commitment. I think sometimes it helps to read the science behind all of this stuff to see that there's longer telomere length in experienced meditators, you know, lower stress, heightened sense of awareness, better performance in sports and academics and everything, easier time getting to sleep, less chronic sickness. Like there's so many kind of benefits that are correlated with people that have this extensive practice. But yeah, no, it's hard. It's really hard until you do it yourself. And everybody's aha moment, everybody's epiphany, everybody's journey and path is different. I think a good way to, and I know that you're doing it with this program, but a good way to kind of inspire participation is to do it with other people. The more people you put in the room together doing the same thing, the more committed you're going to be to it, the more powerful you're going to be to it, the more you put it out there that this is something that you're intending to do, even though, like I say, I'm not going to go out and try to advertise mindfulness meditation for everybody. But if you're posting on Facebook or you're using social media to say, I intend to do this, the more people that hear about it, the more people you have to hold you accountability, generally the higher the accountability. That's another way to do it. But as far as how do you get each individual person to that aha place, I mean, I would argue that some people say it never comes for everybody. And it's just understanding the benefits, knowing that it's good for you and doing it right. You know, I think that there's a lot of things like that. Sometimes, to use the analogy of little kids and vegetables, right? It might not taste good at first, but you know it's going to keep you healthy in the long run. How can you convince them to do it without hiding it from them? I say just dive right in.
I love that you brought up the kid thing because I love that you do this with your kids. How old are your girls?
8 and 6.
Okay, so 8 and 6-year-olds, realistically getting them to do things is herding stray cats for the majority of time. How do you get an 8 and a 6-year-old to A, do it, but B, to understand the value that they're getting from it, knowing that it's not going to be perfect? But what did you tell your kids when you got them to start doing it with you?
Well, I think they, you know, the way that you get kids or other people, especially if you're somebody that's trying to teach somebody something else, and this is another thing too, and I'll relate to this. When Amishi ran they started off in hospitals in mindfulness-based attention training, and they trained instructors, and then they had the instructors go and you know, deliver the practice to the other people that they worked with at the hospitals. And one hospital in particular came back and it's not working. Like people aren't adhering to the protocols. They're not doing it. They're not getting anything out of it. And again, that's a philosophical debate about what you're supposed to get out of it, but they're not getting anything out of it. They're not seeing the benefits or whatever. And what they found out was the instructors themselves weren't practicing. So even though they were delivering it, they weren't practicing. And the point here is that it's modeling the behavior, at least for my kids. Like if they see Megan, my wife, and they see me sit down, and I intentionally do that. Like this morning before they went to school, as they're getting ready to go to school, they're going to leave in 5 minutes. I sit down and turn the timer on and sit down on my stool and look into the backyard and have like maybe some quiet music playing in the background so that they know. They come in and they see it. They see their dad modeling that behavior. And so that way we avoid the do as I say, not as I do kind of parental mistake. And we have the, look, I'm doing this because I know that it's valuable for me, and I would like you to try too. And I think the other part of it too is we don't put a ton of pressure on them to do it in a certain way or do it right. So we'll sit down. Hey, if you want to sit down with us, we're going to sit down right now for 10 minutes. You're welcome to join us. You can leave at any time. And that kind of gives it this open, low pressure. Because I've tried, actually, truthfully, I tried in the past. Of like, no, you're going to sit down, you're going to be quiet, and you're going to do this. And then like 30 seconds later, you think we have monkey mind, you know, be a 6-year-old that doesn't want to be sitting down quietly with their parents and wants to go run around outside. And you start hearing like the foot thumping, and you know, like all the attention-seeking behavior that little kids do.
Especially your kids, how much they move.
And that's but for me personally too, like even in that, this is kind of a little teaching moment too, because even in that experience, you know, like as somebody who wants the kid to sit down, my ego pops up and I want to tell her, shut up and sit down, right? That's the first thought that pops up. Now, because of the practice and the experience, when I'm sitting there, that pops up and I go, oh, how interesting that's the first thing that came up. And I think that's the space. You were talking about the space earlier, kind of leading up into this question. And there's that beautiful Viktor Frankl quote about between stimulus and response, there's a space, and that's in that space is our ability to choose how we're going to like respond to the situation. Right? And I think that's what mindfulness practice, that is one of the wonderful benefits is it's extending that space when you're dealing with a coworker. I will say, since I started practicing, my level of stress in doing something like driving a car in traffic has significantly decreased because, you know, like they say, if you ever have to go to traffic school, you use your horn to avoid an accident, not to remind somebody that they just screwed up. And I think this day and age, with everybody in a rush and everybody so busy and everybody getting in a hurry, we want to drive like idiots. We want to honk the horn. We want to yell at people. And the first step of cultivating more mindfulness in everyday life and seeing it kind of apply practically is having those moments where you go, oh, look at that. I'm really mad about this. Wow, that's stupid. Which is also a judgment. And there's another, and let's talk about judgment actually, because it's a wonderful part of this whole thing. When we're sitting down and going like, this is dumb, we're being judgmental of what's happening right now. And I've gone so far in my own sitting practice where I've sat there and tried to say, like, I had like a sensation on my face, and that sensation, because I labeled as such, turns into an itch, and I feel like, God, I need to scratch this itch. But then my ego's like, no, sit still, bitch. And so I'm sitting there like wanting to itch my face the whole time. And then I'm getting frustrated because I want to itch my face, but I don't want to itch my face because I want to hold the thing. And then I scratch myself, and then I get mad because I scratched my face. And I go, holy cow. Like, if you go back and analyze what happened through that whole thing, if a physical sensation pops up and you need to make an adjustment, just make an adjustment and move on, you know? My desire to hold myself in one position, that is just as bad as my desire to have to scratch my face. And then me judging myself for wanting to scratch my face, and then me judging myself for judging myself after that. Oh, you're a judgmental asshole. Look at that. You're trying to, it's like this vicious cycle of judgment continues, of self-judgment continues. And if we always are applying that to ourselves, how easy afterwards is it going to be for us to apply that to other people? You know, so being able to sit still, recognize when the judgment pops up. There's only 4 real places, or 3 real, there's only a couple places you can go with your mind, right? You could go, if you're sitting down, I say, okay, Sam, you're going to focus on the sensations of your body as you breathe. And so you'll notice when you breathe in, your stomach expands. If you're breathing kind of diaphragmatically, right, your stomach will expand. And when you breathe out, you'll notice that everything just kind of softens. And you just start going back and forth. You could go to the future, right? What do I need to do in the next 20 minutes? What question am I going to ask next? Where are we going to go? You could go to the past. Oh man, the thing that I ate for lunch, or what I was doing earlier, or that workout, I would have done that thing differently. You can go into a physical sensation. Oh man, like my butt on the chair is sore. I don't like the way I'm sitting. Or you can go into some sort of judgment. This is stupid. I don't like it. And there's spectrums of all of those things. You know, what's a good future and bad future. You go to negative judgment about the future. That's anxiety. That's what happens. That's where we go. We apply the judgment filter. This is good or this is bad. Well, this is bad, and I'm thinking about it in the future. That gives me a path to anxiety. This is bad, and I'm thinking about the past. That's the window and the doorway into depression. This is this is good and it feels good. That's also the window into hedonism. You know, this is so bad and it feels bad. That's pain. Like all of those things swirl around us all the time. And what we choose to make the attachment to, those are the lenses that we're going to look at our day with probably the rest of the day. So learning how to sit there and see the factors swirling around and accept that they're a part of life, and then just go back to what's happening in the present moment. That's the real power. That's the skill that helps extend that space between stimulus and response that we're looking for. We want to have more space and more time for us to go, oh man, okay, let me stop. And STOP is a great acronym for it, right? Stop, take a breath, observe, and then proceed. We do that more often than not, we're going to avoid a lot of the conflict that we kind of unconsciously fall into when we don't have a space in between our thoughts and our mouth.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of benefits to mindfulness or meditation, or, you know, if you're a very religious person, like prayer is definitely that same thing, right? It hits the same button. If you're super Catholic or religious, like go pray. I don't care if you call it mindfulness or meditation, it doesn't matter to me. But a lot of what I'm hearing, and this is a lot of people, is the negative self-talk. And, you know, I'm someone that, like, I've always run my life to where it's like, I don't look at that task as, oh, that's impossible. I look at it as, what do I need to do that I don't do right now that gets me there? Right? And like, for me, it's like, nothing's impossible. But I mean, I do have negative thoughts about myself or things that I could be doing better. But so many people, and I do go down this rabbit hole where one thing turns into like, oh, Sam, you couldn't sit there for 10 minutes, to, oh, you're a fucking piece of shit that you don't do anything right. Yeah. And a lot of people go from this to this really quickly. What is going on in the mindfulness game that gets us to remove ourselves? You talked about the ego. You talked about removing the ego. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, because you do it with guys who, shit, you're getting paid millions of dollars to throw this baseball, or you're doing it with a player who's struggling, right? Who's like, oh my God, I got paid and now I can't live up to it. Or can I live up to it, right? And like when it's based on talent or anything else, like, shit, that's a lot. How do you work through that negative self-talk?
The wandering mind is generally negative. And I think that that's the easiest place to start. When we go into the kind of just like automatic network, that automatic network that we have it's negative. When our mind wanders, it's generally not into a positive direction. Now that's different than daydreaming, right? Daydreaming is when you're laying by a pool and you have time. You have no mind wandering counts as when you have a task that you're supposed to be doing or that you set the intention to do, and you can't keep your mind on that particular task. Your mind is wandering somewhere else. Whereas daydreaming is when you have the space to, you're sitting outside, you're watching kids run around, for example, and you don't really have to be doing anything, and then your mind, that can generally be positive. But our mind wanders like 50% of the time, and more so, especially if we're not conscious of where it's going. So we let it go, it immediately goes negative. And the intention of me prefacing the talk about negative self-talk is that that's where it comes from. Like, it's normal to be a negative, judgmental asshole about yourself. That's kind of, there's a self-protection in that whole thing. You can't do this. You're stupid. You suck. You're ugly. You're dumb. You're weak. You're soft. Like, that's how we are as people, and that's okay. And I think the first step is in having the acceptance that you're gonna handle those, because the moment you try to say things like, it's the ironic processes of mental control. The moment I say, I'm gonna replace every good thought with a negative thought, like, that's just gonna make you more negative. You're just gonna think, you're gonna go, oh, I'm stupid. No, I'm not. I'm great. You know, like, that doesn't work. That just makes you think you're even stupider, and you don't believe the voice that's talking even more. So instead, it's just to accept that that's how we are, and these are the things that we have. And that's a huge part of mindfulness in itself, is acceptance of all that arises in the present moment. I'm going to have negative thoughts, and athletes as well. When they go into the game, they're going to have thoughts about doubt. They're going to have negative thoughts, and just as bad are positive thoughts in those moments. What these guys are doing, I think it's Novak Djokovic has a great bit about where he talks about, he's serving for championship point, and he starts having thoughts about how he's going to win. I'm going to win. Like, I'm going to win the, whatever it is, French Open, US Open, Wimbledon, whatever. I'm going to win. And then the guy asks him, well, what did you do when you had that thought? He's like, I let it go. Because that thought, me thinking about that future about me winning, which is a positive thought, which we would probably tell kids if we didn't know better. Oh yeah, keep thinking positive. It's great for you. But that thought takes him off of the task that's at hand right now. It takes him out of the present moment, which is where he fully needs to be if he's going to throw the ball up and hit it exactly where he needs to hit it, right? That's what he needs to be focused on. What is my physical cue? What's my small little anchor statement that I have in my mind, whether it be like, easy and explode or something. Or if you think about people standing over a bar to do a weightlifting exercise, generally we have these kind of one, two, or three word little clusters of things that are what are in my line of work, we call them anchor statements, right? At work with the Cubs. Bob Tewksbury, my partner, coined that phrase, but you have an anchor statement that gets you back into your right kind of physical mechanic to do that thing in the moment. You can kind of attach to it. But anything that positive or negative, like we're talking about negative thoughts, but anything positive that doesn't have to do with what's happening right now, it's not valuable at all. It's taking some of that attention that we have. So you had 100% attention on throwing the ball up and hitting it. Well, now 5% of it is on me seeing myself holding the trophy.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful in the moment. So that's my first thing about negative self-talk. Accept that it's going to happen and listen to it. Listen to it at first. And then the second part of that, if you do want to supplant it with something else, or you want to figure out a healthy strategy to replace it, one great phrase that I heard, and I wish I could attribute it to somebody, I just don't remember, is talk to yourself, don't listen to yourself. So say it out loud versus internally. There's a lot of research on positive self-talk out loud, not internally, not trying to replace the thought. But if we listen to ourselves, like I said, 50% of the time our mind's wandering. A wandering mind is generally negative. If we're just listening to that bullshit all the time, that's the real fake news, how we feel about ourselves. That is fake as shit. And so listening to that is a bad strategy. Acknowledging that it's going to be like that and knowing that it's part of a normal life, that helps us let go and remove the attachment to it. It's always going to happen, especially in stressful situations, especially when we're under pressure, when you have to give that presentation at work, or you got to get up and speak in front of a bunch of people, or you have to do anything that anytime you're in a place where you have to do something difficult and other people are watching, that voice is going to come in. It always will. It always has. And so just acknowledging that it's there and going, oh, cool. I'm prepared for this. I'm ready for this. This is where I want to be. Or even one of the things that I used to use when I was a player, when guys would make their major league debut and I would go out to the mound, and I would see these people that were really nervous. A lot of times in partnership with those negative thoughts that we have, we also have some physiological symptoms, sweaty palms, quickening heartbeat, like wavering of the voice, like all those things that happen, the physiological symptoms of stress. And I would ask the guys to notice those things. I'd go out to the mound. This is before I had any of this training. I'd go out to the mound and go, hey, do you feel your heart beating? And they'd be like, yeah. I'm like, hey, you feel your palms are sweaty? Yeah. I go, good. That means that your body recognizes that you're where you're supposed to be. This is what it feels like. How we feel right now, this is what it feels like to be fully alive. This is why we do this. This is why we do this. And so that concept of reframing, if you hear that negative voice really popping up, especially associated with an event that might have some pressure or stress involved, then now if you look at that and you go, oh, look at that, I'm in the right place. I'll be harder on myself than anybody else out here will be. Totally. You can kind of reframe it and change it. And so that's how we try to deal with it in sports, right? We try to get guys to acknowledge and accept that they're going to be shitty to themselves. They're going to be judgmental. They're going to be negative. And then to reframe those moments as, this is the signal that I am where I'm supposed to be. And then the final layer of that is trusting. We always say trust the process, right? Trust the process. Well, if you haven't prepared, then you're fucked at that point. So if you have prepared, then that's when you can go back and say, well, I practiced all this shit. I did all this. I hit in baseball. I hit in the cage. I hit on the field before the game. I studied the starting pitcher. I've been playing baseball since I was 5. I'm as ready as I could. I got enough sleep last night. I took the right supplements before the game. I ate well. I got in the sauna to warm up. I did the cold bath after that. Like I did my breathing exercises. I've taken a nice slow exhale. Right, I'm ready. I'm 100% ready. So then it's when that release, that letting go of that voice is like, fuck off, you know, I don't need to listen to you.
So funny that you were doing this as a player. And it's so fitting that this is your journey now, right? But like,
Yeah.
I'm sure it would have been so nice to have a lot of this training when you're like, you got some stud kid that's making his major league debut, be like, hey, let me give it to you in, you know, multiple ways. But like, you've been this guide for so many people for so long, being able to help curb that mindset, right? Like, you got some kid making his major league debut who's starting his first time in wherever, Wrigley, Yankee Stadium, like, shit's gonna have some nerves in his hands, right? But you gotta go out there like, all right, buddy, here we go. Like, God, I love that this has just been your journey for so long. And it fits so well to what the catcher mindset is.
Yeah.
Right?
And I did not do a good job of applying this to myself when I was playing too, which I think is another key point. You know, we learn best from people that generally weren't great at the things that they're trying to teach us, especially in sports. You know, and there have been longitudinal studies of, in baseball, for example, the like Hall of Fame player managers have one of the lowest winning percentages of anybody because they don't know what it's like to struggle. And I personally know what it's like to second guess and over practice. I mean, by the end of my career as an offensive player, I called so many games and watched so many baseball games that I was about 95% sure most of the time what pitch was coming, and I was right. And it didn't help. It didn't help. It didn't help me. I hit 192 my last year. It didn't help me at all. And I think it's because I lacked the belief at the end. I lacked the belief in my process at the end of it. When you bounce around and you experience different hitting coaches and you get different ideas that get put into your head. And I was somebody that was always was searching for more information, searching, probably at a detriment. And because I was there, I think it's easier for people to believe me when I tell them to trust what they're doing, because I've done the other thing. I've done the other thing. The other thing is not effective. You know, you can do all the right things, but if you don't believe that what you've done up to that point is going to make you successful, then you're not giving yourself the best opportunity to be successful.
I love it. You know, you mentioned earlier the idea of the monkey mind, and this is a concept that comes up heavily if you guys jump into reading more about meditation or some of the books that John and I will probably throw out there. But talk us through the monkey mind. What do you mean by that? What is the monkey mind?
It's just when your mind's wandering and all crazy. I mean, I think to get into the specifics of the brain, a lot of times it happens in kind of emotional reactive situations when the energy, the activity goes from the prefrontal cortex into the amygdala. The amygdala takes over. Some people say lizard brain too. Kind of fight or flight response, sympathetic nervous system. They're all related things, right? But monkey mind generally is the distracted, bouncing all over the place mind, from this thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. A good way to put yourself into that is like, just go ahead and stare at your phone for an hour and then come back to me after that. And you're going to look at it and you're going to come out of it like, I can't latch on to one concept and hold on for a long period of time. And our society, with our flashing lights and screens and televisions and all the shit that's on all the time, and the access to everything in our pocket, I mean, it trains it, it strengthens it. You know, like nowadays you could go sit on a subway train or a bus or something, and you're not going to be bored because you have a smartphone. And I think one way to not combat, but one day to handle or get yourself, I really hesitate using the terms better or worse because they're judgmental, but to deal with feeling that way is to find instances where you can be bored. You know, if you have an iPhone, set the app limit on that phone for like an hour or 2 hours a day. And when it shuts off, you're done. And go be bored. Boredom is a luxury. And in those moments, you'll work some of these things out yourself. We're so quick to jump to, I've got to be productive. I've got to be doing something. I've got to be learning something. I can't just sit here and let my mind go. But those are the opportunities to daydream. And we don't give ourselves those opportunities anymore. And there's so much creativity and inspiration that pops up, not from watching somebody else exercise or do something funny, or or watching what animal Joe Rogan's shooting, or what airplane Dan Bilzerian's on. Like we go down these, that's my kind of athlete population that follows those things, right? But we go down these different Mercury's in retrograde mindfulness memes on Instagram, and we can go so far down this rabbit hole that we lose these opportunities for ourselves to just work it out without technology. I think one great resource that kind of deals with our reliance on, because, and don't get me wrong, all of this technology is incredibly valuable if we're using it intentionally. I think that's the main point of my message. But I think it's Unplugged. Yeah, Unplugged. Brandon McKenzie and Dr. Andy Galpin. It's a good like almost like encyclopedia kind of reference book of the different things. And then if you want to get really heavy into our physiology and our behavior and stuff, anything by I got them over there too, all of Robert Sapolsky's books, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, A Primate's Memoir, Trouble with Testosterone, Behave. And in fact, there's even there's a certain point in Unplugged where Galpin and McKenzie cite some of Sapolsky's work because it's about our physiological responses to psychological stress. And that psychological stress comes because we're narrative animals, and our brain and the ridiculous, negative, shitty things that we think have direct effects on our physiology.
Man, it's amazing to look at how much goes into this, right? Like the idea of sitting quietly, like there's so much that goes into it beyond what am I getting out of it? What is it really doing? What's going on in the background, right? Where do we start, right? Like how do you get someone to start going? Are you making like your people go like, all right, let's just try 60 seconds. Let's just try 1 minute. Like how do we start this process?
Yeah, you start small and work your way up. I mean, I know that people that have, for example, not that I like for people to rely on technology, but people that have Apple Watches, they have a breath app that it starts at a minute, but you can turn the dial and turn it up to 5, and it'll like vibrate on the time to inhale, and it'll stop on the time to exhale. And you can set the breath settings for different things. Don't worry about it. It's set when you get it at 7 breaths a minute. That's a good place to start, and that thing will remind you twice a day if you wear it. I personally, like I have an older version of the watch that I kind of intermittently wear because I have the practice in the morning, but it's helpful, through like a chaotic day. If I'm on an airplane or we're going somewhere, all of a sudden my watch beeps, I look down, it says breathe. I'm like, oh, thank you. Like that's the one reminder I do need every once in a while. I think we all do. But a minute is a good place to start. And I think that setting a timer for 60 seconds, okay, and sitting, when you sit, you ideally in a mindfulness practice, it's tough to, certain things like a mindful body scan, I'll do those for athletes, and I will put people to sleep. Because it's so boring. That's where that's a whole nother webcaster. It's a whole nother one of those. We could go into the different practices, but for focused attention practice, which is setting an intention to focus on one thing and then constantly reorienting your attention back over and over again to that thing when you notice that your mind's wandering, catching yourself without any judgment. Oh, look, there I am again, thinking about the future, but I sat down and I decided that I was going to focus on my breath. So, oh, there I am again, thinking about the future, right? For 60 seconds is a good place to start. But you generally want to have your back off of the seat, because as our back gets supported, if we're sitting down, we can quickly go from mindfulness practice to we get really relaxed as we breathe, right? So doing diaphragmatic breathing. For 60 seconds, it's just a great place to start, I think. And then just slowly building up the time. And I also suggest too, starting with something like music. Wordless music is very helpful. I'm a big fan on Spotify of, there's an artist called DJ Drez, D-R-E-Z. He has the practice tapes, okay? And there's just no words. It's like a kind of like a beat that undulates and changes over time. And it's nice because you don't feel like you're focused and following the same thing over and over again. But I think all those songs are like 20 minutes long. So as your practice gets longer, they're nice. You don't even have to set a timer. You can sit down, hit play, and when the song ends, you're done. And you go, oh, I just meditated for 20 minutes. And you're going to find yourself when you're doing those things, you'll find yourself totally lost. And that's my biggest piece of advice to everybody is when you start doing this and you do catch yourself, like it's been, who knows, 5 or 6 minutes where you're just totally gone somewhere else, your first impulse is going to be like, shit, I'm not doing it right. Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. You just go, oh, look at that. There I went. And now I'm coming back. And that's the point, because you never have the same thing twice. So starting at 60 seconds, and then, I don't know, you could do that for a week, 60 seconds. And then you could bump it up to 5 minutes in the second week. And then you could bump it up to 12 minutes in the third week, and then take 2 days off of it. Take the weekend off. Do it Monday through Friday, first thing in the morning, 12 minutes. It's not a lot of time. It's free.
Yeah.
The app that I use on my phone is called Insight Timer. It's I'll show you what it looks like. It's a free, I'm declining the 50% off, but it's a free app, right? And you can just, I'll show you, look, you can just set a little timer, and it can put music in the background if you want. But it's nice because it tracks it for you. If you're somebody that likes to know how your duration, you want to have streaks. It's funny. For a long time, there was 1 year where I did it like every day on the timer. And then I realized that I was getting attached to my streak. So I had to force myself to meditate or to do my practice and just not turn the thing on.
Interesting.
Because it's easy to build attachments to things like this. We're so driven by progress and by getting better and by getting to a certain place, and that's great. It really helps us, I think, as people improve. But at the same time, we can really get attached to it. And if we find ourselves meditating just to maintain our streak, then we've lost a little bit of the purpose of the whole experience.
Interesting. Do you notice a difference in types of people in their environment, like a athlete versus a corporate knowledge worker versus like a stay-at-home mom? Like, are you noticing different strategies or different success rates with meditation? Because I feel like for a lot of people, they probably just listened to that and said, a minute a day? No way. A minute a day is going to add value to my life. Like, that seems like we're in a day and age where more is better. Faster, farther, harder, heavier, where it's like a minute a day of mindfulness is like, that seems fucking dumb. Like that can add value to my life. So is it all people that get that, you think?
I think a lot of people.
Or where?
I think that you're speaking in a way that reflects a lot of the demographics. Everyone's different, obviously, individually, even in athlete populations, civilian populations. Everybody is different, but everybody tends to think the same thing, like stuff like that too, right? Like, how could it possibly be helpful? But I mean, a quick PubMed search or of the benefits of these practices should provide you with all the evidence that you need. It's almost like we don't want to believe it because it's so simple. Yep. I mean, we want to overcomplicate it, and that's another part about this whole process. So many people have taken this concept of mindfulness or the concept of meditation, and they write books about it, and they have training, all these super intricate training programs. And I know it's something like, for example, even you and I have talked about training programs for something like this. And I think that they're great, but so for example, I can tell you how I was trained. My training, Scott Rogers is the head of the mindfulness department at University of Miami, partners with the neuroscientist Amishi Jha. We were very strict about our language. Because when you're doing studies, okay, if you have people repeating different words within the practices or going off script, which they call the score, like a musical score, if you're going off script, you are no longer in the confines of what's been studied. I think that's where the value is, finding people that have had professional training that can fall within something like the mindfulness-based attention training script, or fall within the mindfulness-based stress reduction script. Being trained in those specific things, you can say, okay, this is the practice that leads to these structural brain changes over 8 weeks, or this is the practice that extends attention spans, right? A lot of times what happens now is people glom onto these concepts and they go, oh man, Google's doing mindfulness, Facebook's doing mindfulness. I'm gonna package this thing, I'm gonna make it look really cool, right? And I'm gonna sell it to people for hundreds of dollars when it's a lot of times just bullshit. So be wary, first of all. and know that you don't need all sorts of technology and all sorts of training to be really good at it. I mean, if you're sitting down again, if you're sitting down and choosing to focus on one thing and reorienting your attention back and nobody's talking to you, you know what you're not doing? You're not going outside the context of mindfulness practice because you don't have somebody talking in your ear that's not true. So like when I was trained, flew down to Miami and spent a couple days down there directly learning from the people. And then every day after that, meditation practice, listen to the audio directly from my teacher, Scott. I still listen to his audio. But I listened to Scott's audio, and then I would note down what popped up for a year of that. I have had a year's worth of mindfulness logs, and that was going through the 4 different practices. I could break those down really fast in a second, but going through all those practices. So we have in mindfulness-based attention training, for example, we have four components of the program: focused attention, a mindful body scan, a practice called open monitoring, and then the last one is a connection practice. So open monitoring, the body scan is obvious, right? In the body scan, what we're dealing with is you're scanning your whole body. So you're connecting mind to body. So for an example, you would connect your mind to the sensations arising from the bottom of your foot, and you're labeling those sensations as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Feels good, feels bad, doesn't feel anything. We're working on just feeling it and then moving to the next thing, not holding on to good feelings and not trying to run away from things that we identify as unpleasant, right? And that kind of just lets us accept things as they are. That's that whole practice. In open monitoring, you're going from the focused attention practice, which is how I already described, of focusing on one thing and reorienting your attention, to working on the modulation. So you're starting off like that, and then you're opening it up to include everything that you notice, that your awareness notices, and then coming back in again and working with the breath, and then going back out again. So that's kind of, if you think about it from a sporting context, that's going from a baseball field from hitting, right, to now all of a sudden being in the outfield and playing defense and having to see the whole thing. So it's working on the awareness modulation. And then the final practice is a connection practice, which is very similar to like loving kindness meditation that you would see with somebody like Jack Kornfield, in more of a Buddhist slanted perspective. But that's working on the judgmental elements that we have. And what you're doing through that practice with very specific language is you're focusing on yourself, loved ones, people that you don't really know, somebody that you definitely don't know, and somebody that you might dislike or have a difficult time with. And you're practicing sending out just the same signal the whole time. So I introduce this element, somebody that you've had an issue with, and you're going to wish them well and good health and happiness and positivity. And ironically, this is a funny part about that. So a couple years ago, we were doing this practice with some younger baseball players. And we were really wary about introducing this one because it's very soft, and you kind of worry about the, we're tough guys, like the foo-foo element of, we're going to send loving vibes to everybody. But I finished with the practice, and I'm a bit skeptical on how they're going to react, because I know I kind of had an initial kind of pullback when we first started doing it ourselves. And I asked them, they're like, that was the best one we've ever done. Like, I just thought of so many people that I cared about, and like, it was really cool to think about. And I'm like, oh man, an important thing for all of us to do, I think, is to figure out in this day and age when it's so easy to just spew social media hate, to think about doing stuff like that. So I spent a year cycling through those 4 practices and taking notes and having constant Zoom sessions with our teacher, and then practicing giving out practicing the delivering practice. And then we went back at the end of the year, had to deliver practice to graduate students with like a panel watching to make sure that we were staying within the language. And then that's how we get okay, you guys are accepted as, you can go deliver this practice to the organization that you work for, to clients that you work with, because they know that it's within the context of the language. And it just took a long time to not go off script. We want to do so many different things. I'll never forget my first time down there. One of the experiences I had is we're sitting there talking, and he's like, and the way that kind of dynamic works is you'd kind of talk about some of the history of mindfulness and then do a practice, and then talk and then do a practice. And so he guided us through a basic focus attention practice, and then he asked everybody how it was going. and he got to me, and I was having trouble focusing. And so one of the things that I used to do is, everyone's familiar with box breathing, I assume, right? And so I was box breathing while he was doing the practice. And he was like, how did it go for you? And I'm like, well, I was having trouble at first because my mind was wandering a lot. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, but what really helped me is I started box breathing. I'd breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, out for 4, hold it for 4. And he goes, did I ask you to do that? And I went like, oh, no, you didn't. He goes, yeah, it's okay for your mind to wander. That's the whole point of this whole thing, is to give yourself the space to let it do that, so you can recognize that it's gone and then bring it back again, and recognize that it's gone and then bring it back again. We're never going to be perfect. And that was the first kind of correction to my process that I had, was to strip things away. It's simpler than we think it is. It's just a pain in the ass and a lot more difficult than we ever want to give it credit for.
I'm so happy that you brought that up, like right at the end, like doing it right? As an athlete, like you're used to being task oriented. John, go do this. This is going to get you X result. And fuck if meditation does that for you, in terms of like being able to structure it in that way. But to be able to hear like, oh, the game is to, and this is how I heard it, was watching cars go by, watching traffic. And it was like, recognize the thought, let it go. Recognize the thought, let it go. And I was like, oh, because the thoughts, everybody expects to start meditation and like be good at it. Oh, I magically never do it till like I can sit here and not think for 10 minutes. And ladies, I'm sure a lot of you can attest that your husband definitely probably goes longer than 10 minutes without a thought popping into his head. But for 10 minutes, you're like, oh, like that helped me not put pressure on like evaluating like, oh, I only had 10 thoughts come into my head this meditation session. I only had 7. Instead of being like, no, the game is recognize, release, process. Give yourself that space. Don't be so caught up in trying to do it perfect. You're not going to be perfect. Don't worry about what version of meditation. John just mentioned there's 4 different versions of meditation out there. If one attaches more value to you in the beginning and gets you to do it, awesome. It's like early in, like I used my breath and headspace and binaural beats to help get me into a meditation zone to go do it. And now it's like, oh, the distractions I don't like. And to be honest, I personally like doing a float tank for 90 minutes more than I do 10 minutes a day, personally. Sure. But like I think once you release the pressure of being perfect at it, holy shit, that make it so much better and such an enjoyable experience. And I love that you brought in so many different elements around what goes on behind the scenes with meditation and mindfulness, where we're supposed to use it at, how we can use it. Like there's so much to it. But at the end of it, I love that your advice is just do it, right?
Yeah, just do it and reframe it too. I think that's like you just said, if you like be thankful and grateful the days when you sit down and your mind is racing. It gives you more opportunity to practice. And the more opportunity you have to practice, the more, if you want to talk about productivity, the more productive technically that session would be. The more times you reorient your attention back to what you originally intend to sit down and think about or focus on, the more times you do that, the better you get at doing that. The better, that's where that is getting better. So on the days where we sit down, if you sit down and somebody's chainsawing the tree down to the house next to you, you go, oh shit, I can't meditate. This isn't serene. Like, no, be thankful for every distraction. Every distraction is like putting 2.5 pounds on the bar over and over again. Oh shit, I have a nut. Great. Yes. Thank you. Like I've had this experience with my children as well, where I've been sitting there and one of them's just been running around in circles in front of me. And I thought, God damn it. Like I want to yell at this kid. She keeps running in front of me. But then I go, oh, this is another lesson, like kids and stuff, kids, distractions, like the world of distraction is your guru. Right? Yeah. That's who you're supposed to be following. And
it doesn't go away.
It's never going to go away. It's never going to go away. So the more shit that's going on, the more cars that are driving by, or people have also said like leaves floating down a stream, whatever. There's so many different metaphors and analogies to describe the thought stream, basically. But the more things in your mind, the more things going on, the louder noises, the more flashing lights. You don't have to be in some perfect place or perfect state. You don't have to be in an orange robe with a shaved head on top of the Himalayas, right? Sitting there for 8 hours a day, not eating food for 2 weeks at a time, because we're not trying to achieve any sort of state. You don't need to be outside in nature. You don't need to be on a particular school. You don't need to have a particular body position to practice this. I mean, one of the best places for me personally that one of the ways I love to do, or I found space to do this too, traveling for work, getting on an airplane and sitting down. Because I think that for a lot of us, when we do travel, especially commercially, right? When you get on an airplane, there is a lot of annoying shit that can happen to most people. People bumping into you, people are talking, perhaps there's a baby crying on your flight behind you. I look at those things now like it's like a mind gym. You know, I look at it and I'm like, oh man, this is great. All this shit is going crazy. There's no Wi-Fi on my plane for the next 4 hours and I've got to fly from Arizona to Philadelphia. You know, like, what am I going to do? I got this book and I got my mind. Well, I could just sit here, put my headphones in, put on music with no words, and focus on my breathing and see how far that gets me. And I have had times where I've gotten on a plane like that, and literally 2.5 hours later, the plane hit the ground, and I went, what happened all that time? You know, like I was gone. I was there, but I was gone. I was focused on this breath, and then that breath was gone, and now this one was here. Man, that's not like the one I just had. And then that one's gone, so I let that one go. Then I started thinking about this thing, like, I'll go back to this here again, my breath again. Over and over and over again. And again, I think another point of clarification, that's why we use the breath, because it's automatic, right? If you think about it, if our conscious mind was in charge of our breathing process, we'd be dead a long time ago, because we do not have the attention span long enough to keep us breathing and alive. So there's something magic that happens in this kind of meshing of mind and body and spirit when we use our consciousness to point our awareness at the automatic processes of our body. So pointing it at something that happens automatically, trying to feel my heartbeat, right? Trying to notice or paying attention to my breathing, paying attention to the way my body is. You know, you talk about like runner's high and stuff like that. When people get kind of locked in and all of their awareness is on their feet, one after the other, hitting the ground, you know, that turns into this kind of automaticity that they can just live in, and there's this freedom in there. It's the same thing. Our breath can always be our anchor, because if it's gone, it means we're dead. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what's happening, you can always take a second to focus on the process of respiration and having that as an anchor back to the present moment, because it only happens now. It doesn't happen it's not happening in the future. It's not happening in the past. You're only breathing right now. So it's always there for you to focus on. At the end of every feeling, the end of every emotional wave, at the end of every difficult conversation you have with your spouse or your husband or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, at the end of all of those things, you always have your breath to be able to hold on to. And as a result, look at all of these wisdom traditions, look at all of these different, you know, meditative and contemplative practices, consciousness practices, and they all kind of go back to that kind of same core concept, focusing on the automatic processes of our body, of what makes us who we are, things that we don't have to think about. There's some sort of spiritual magic involved in there.
Dude, I love it. That was a great point to kind of hammer on and kind of take it home. Guys, meditation is a practice. It's something you're going to do continually. It's something that can start with 1 minute at a time. There's different versions. Find the one that works for you. Really focus on not being perfect and letting yourself have the space to improve, and watch yourself find your own aha moments, because John and I both have had different ones, and the people that we've worked with have all had their own different ones. It's hard to explain what the value of meditation or mindfulness gives you until you do it, but hopefully this helps set you guys on the right track. It's a part of the program. Hopefully you guys find that this is one that sticks with you forever, but for some of you it's going to be more of a challenge, and I hope that it becomes a practice that you continually go to or see as an option to help you in whatever facet of your life, improving your body, your lifestyle, your fitness, your profession, whatever that might look like. So, John, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Such a pleasure to get to talk with you and see your face all the time anyway. And dude, can't wait to see you again.
Me too, Sam. Great to see you, and I hope this helps some people out.
Obviously, awesome. Thank you so much, man.